Hi everyone, welcome to Broadband Deployment News. Electric co-ops are in a great position to be able to provide broadband services to very rural areas. Be right back to talk about that. Thanks for joining me. Rick Uzzi here with Broadband Deployment News. So I saw a couple of stories recently about electric co-ops, so I thought I'd kind of highlight that today because they really are in a great position to be able to close the digital divide. So here's a story in a government, what is this, government, it's a government magazine or website. So broadband rural reach, how electric co-ops reduce the digital divide. And this is actually a kind of consortium or a group of 3 EMCs that are doing this together. So you've got the Virginia, Maryland, and Delaware Association of Broadband Cooperatives plans to connect 200,000 rural residents via fiber within 5 years. So this is all stuff that's going on right now that these companies, these co-ops are doing. So as electrification spreads across the U.S. and as it spread across the U.S. in the 1930s, electric cooperatives stepped up to provide service in rural America when traditional electricity providers felt doing so would not be profitable. So that wasn't, we forget about that. I wasn't born, I don't forget about it. I mean, that was way before my time. But, at that time, similar to today, where there were certain areas, pockets that had electricity and lots of areas that didn't. So electric co-ops, membership co-ops were formed to be able to provide that electricity to places where it was hard to reach. It says now co-ops are stepping up again, this time to close the digital divide. An effort in Virginia has connected 30,000 rural residents to the internet through fiber since 2017. And plans to hook up another 200,000 in the next 3 to 5 years. The work's being driven by the Virginia, Maryland, and Delaware Association of Broadband Cooperatives, which was established to provide a singular, unifying voice for cooperative broadband interests in those states, I'm assuming. And then you see their acronym VMD ABC. That's a mouthful, but at least the last 3 letters are ABC, which makes it easier. As in their electrification effort in the 1930s, cooperatives are not driven by profits. That's one of the advantages that they have, is they're member-owned. So they can, it's going to be more expensive for them to provide the service, but they can try to keep the costs down because of the fact being member-owned, they're not driven by profits. While some states have been slow to embrace co-ops as broadband providers, some co-op-based ISPs in Virginia have been pushing rural connectivity for a while. And, one reason is states, there's always lobbying efforts by maybe the major telephone companies and cable companies and others that want to keep, electric co-ops and municipalities from providing broadband service because that is a less of a level playing field. I mean, they have a point in one sense that, again, an EMC doesn't have a profit motive. And there's nothing wrong with profit. I mean, the whole point of a profit is that a company steps up and is going to do the work to be able to make something happen, and they get a profit for that. So that's the reason that they're in business. But when you have a nonprofit entity like a city or an EMC, it makes it more difficult for a private company to compete. But if the private companies are not stepping up, then there's a reason for those not-for-profits to come in and do this. And in the case of EMC, a lot of times where they're serving is in these rural parts of counties. Now, they do also serve in areas that are not rural, maybe small towns, those kinds of things. But I mean, a lot of the area that they're covering, their coverage, is in these very rural areas where you've got just a few customers per mile or even just several miles per customer, and it's very difficult to make a business case for a for-profit company to do that. Gary Wood, the CEO of Firefly Broadband, a wholly owned subsidiary of the Central Virginia Electric Cooperative, said CVEC surveyed members in 1998 about their needs beyond electricity and found that around 30% of respondents said they lacked internet access. In response, CVEC started to provide dial-up internet the following year and served about 3,000 customers before it moved toward fiber. So 1999, they were providing dial-up internet. And actually, we were doing that back then for electric co-ops and others, even just independent internet providers, because you didn't need to own the last mile infrastructure because the phone lines were there. All you needed were your own phone lines. The phone line already went to the customer, and you just needed to be able to provide service over, a dial-up connection. So we were doing that. We were a dial-up internet provider way back in the early to mid-90s. And then when we started doing wholesale broadband, we brought on different kinds of ISPs that wanted to get in the business. We had some electric co-ops that signed up with us that were doing dial-up, and we had telephone companies that wanted to get in the business, and then cable companies. So that's how we kind of got started on the wholesale market, was through doing dial-up for some of these companies like telephone companies and EMCs, and even some cable companies, and then into broadband after that. So it's an interesting story. So these guys obviously got into the business early, and you can see they were serving about 3,000 customers before they moved to fiber. And of course, we had a similar situation where, electric co-ops that were doing that either exited the business or they started providing fiber. It really depended on what the competitive market was around them. If the phone company started offering DSL service, which at the time was great internet, right? Because you had dial-up and you had DSL when the phone company started to provide internet. So then a lot of those electric co-ops got out of the business, but some did continue on and try to upgrade their networks into fiber to be able to do that. Broadband uses most of the same infrastructure the co-ops do to provide electricity, including public rights of way. So that's important. So these guys, they're very well positioned from that standpoint as well. They've got the public rights of way. They've got telephone poles all over the place, I guess power poles all over the place. So they've got that infrastructure. They're used to burying cable and things. Again, not-for-profit nature of their business. So very well positioned there. So it says this next phase of fiber deployment across Virginia could be challenging, however, due to the topography of the communities and low population density. So it sounds like they've been doing the easier parts first. Now they get to the challenging parts, both for topography as well as those two things can affect how expensive this is, or really, the return that you're going to get on it. So if it's really expensive to lay the fiber, it takes longer to get that return back, or if there's just very few customers to pay for the service, it takes longer to get paid back for that. Wood said Firefly's service areas include the Blue Ridge Mountains and the Blue Ridge Parkway, which feature both remote and challenging terrain. Difficulties can include needing to dig into rock or cross marshland to lay fiber. So they're already providing power to these places, so that they've got an advantage there in that they kind of know the lay of the land, and they maybe can leverage some of that, but it's still going to be difficult for them to get the fiber in place. All co-ops must deal with low population density, which could drive up the cost of customers' monthly internet bills if they're not subsidized and if infrastructure costs are not kept low. In the Blue Ridge service area, Wood said Firefly has around 8 customers per mile, but added that VMD-ABC members could take advantage of the enhanced buying power that comes with multiple cooperatives all coming together to buy the same infrastructure. That is an advantage. If they got 3 states trying to do this at once, then they do have that buying power to maybe keep some of those costs down. Despite the progress, rural residents are desperate to be connected. I think for us, the biggest challenge here is expectations, Lee said. We have a great relationship with our members and they trust us. I think that's why they started clamoring and saying, hey, you guys have got to pick this up, run with it. We need you to step up again. So again, another advantage of co-ops, they're member owned. So one reason that they're not for profit. So the people that are the customers are also the owners in a sense. So that's, they try to listen to their owners. It's also important to build digital literacy among residents who will be connected to the broadband internet for the first time. Logan compared that to the early days when the co-ops first provided electricity to members, then had to educate them on how they could harness electric power to improve the quality of their life. That's interesting. So talking about, it's very similar to what we're talking about today with internet. And it says here to do that, he said VMD-ABC created a cooperative living room where it goes into the communities it serves and helps residents learn how broadband can improve their everyday lives. Nationally, electric cooperatives have played a leading role in building out broadband. According to the National Rural Electric Cooperative, or NRECA, around 200 co-ops are providing or building out broadband, while another 200 are assessing the feasibility of providing service. NRECA said more than 6 million households in co-op service areas lack access to high-speed internet. And again, a lot of that has to do with where those folks live. So they live in counties that are, they live in rural parts of counties that just have not been covered, but the co-ops cover that. Another thing for co-ops, by the way, generally in their charter, they need to provide, if they're going to provide service, they need to provide service to everyone. So I think they all are approaching it in that this is our service area and we are going to cover every bit of this area. We have to do that if we're going to do that. So they're looking at the cost of that as they do these feasibility studies. So a couple other stories here about others that are doing this. You see here Comporium and York Electric complete the first phase of build out. So this is in Rock Hill, South Carolina, and York, South Carolina. Comporium, that was, I think it was Rock Hill Telephone at one point. So that's a telephone company. That's how they got started, years and years ago, was Rock Hill Telephone. So Comporium and YEC have completed the first of 3 phases of their joint effort to supply high-speed internet service to 5,000 unserved cooperative members. So that's a kind of a public-private partnership where these 2 companies are getting together to provide the service. In July of 2021, the first York Electric member was able to connect to the partnership's network. With the completion of this first phase of the project, more than 2,100 YEC members in northwestern York County have access to broadband speeds up to a gig. Last year, Comporium and YEC announced their partnership to build a fiber optic network in western York and parts of Cherokee counties. This network, under construction now, offers internet speeds up to a gig, where DSL or satellite service were the only choice at one time. Working together, we have been able to provide high-quality broadband solution to rural YEC members, and we've been able to do it quickly. Over 700 customers have already had their service connected, and we're connecting more each day. Construction of phase 2 of the project is underway now. Comporium and YEC will continue to turn on sections of the network as each piece of the build-out is complete. Comporium also takes part in the FCC's Affordable Connectivity Program. So in this partnership, it looks like maybe YEC is going to be responsible for maybe rights of way and maybe even laying the fiber network and helping with the investment part of that. And it sounds like maybe Comporium is going to be running the broadband business because they're already doing that now with their telephone company that they've got where they're providing service. So this is a telephone company and an EMC that are partnered up together in areas that are hard to reach. So that's a great example there of a public-private partnership. See, Conway fan says, you live in the Blue Ridge area. Okay. Charter has to partner with Appalachian Power to get their RDEF network built, along with help of the county. As an anxious potential customer, it seems like a very slow process. I know it does. Yeah, I know you've been really looking for this and staying on top of it. So it will happen, but yeah, it's one of those things that seems to take forever. And then you hear about stories like this and people are getting connected, and I'm sure you're like, man, why can't that be me? But it will happen. Construction of CFEC fiber to the home broadband network begins, providing gig speeds at an affordable price to nearly 11,000 in phase 1. So this is Central Florida. Construction of the Central Florida Electric Cooperative's 100% fiber optic network, which will provide low-cost, high-speed internet and phone services to local communities through fiber by Central Florida, which is a long sentence, has officially begun with make-ready engineering crews starting work in the Chiefland area on October 3rd. Make-ready construction is expected to follow starting on December 1st before fiber construction finally begins in March of 2023. So even these folks are probably like, man, get it done, but at least there's the plans are here in place and there's timelines in place. Phase 1 is going to be passing nearly 11,000 homes and businesses in the process. Fiber will be built directly to the home business for 100% of CFEC's members. So again, their plan is to build out to all of their members, 100%, as well as those served by other utilities within phase 1, wherever their facilities are in close proximity and make-ready condition to CFEC infrastructure. So it sounds like they might be, in some cases, a competitive provider to other utilities that are kind of adjacent where they're close to their infrastructure. Fiber by Central Florida looks forward to eventually reaching everyone in the service area to provide the fastest, most reliable internet connection on the market today at a price everyone can afford. And then one last story I saw, $50 million awarded to New Hampshire Electric Cooperative for broadband build-out. The New Hampshire Electric Cooperatives won $50 million grant to build out broadband in rural parts of the state. The grant was awarded by the New Hampshire Department of Business and Economic Affairs as part of $220 million in federal funding through ARPA. An initial estimate from the governor's office found that the $50 million program would be enough to provide service to around half of the 30,000 addresses in the state that lack internet. So that's significant. But then listen to this. The co-op said in an announcement, Wednesday it will reach 23,000 addresses with the grant money, or around 75% of those without service. So they're saying that's going to bring it down to where only, they've got 30,000 addresses in the state now that lack internet. So that would have cut it to 15, and now it's closer to, what does that make it? Is that going to be, 25, I don't know, something like 75%, what is that, 8,000? Something like that. Anyway, not good at math, but that's going to cut it down quite a bit as far as the, 7,000. I can do that math, 30,000 minus 23,000, so 7,000. That would be unserved in the state. Or again, around 75% of those without service will now be covered. Now, I don't know if they're factoring inflation in here, so I'm not sure when the co-op looked at their numbers, because I was just reading somewhere else that I think RDOF, they're saying RDOF money now, that the amount of, basically the amount that money is going to be able to pay for is like half of what it was, because they say prices have doubled. At least that's what they're saying. So they're saying kind of the price to deploy fiber has doubled on some of these RDOF kinds of build outs, I guess maybe since folks have gotten the money. And it has been a couple of years since the auction took place now. And, we've seen what's happened with inflation. Inflation had been fairly steady for many, many years. And just recently, this has had a significant impact. So we'll have to see. Maybe it'll be back to the half of the 30,000. State prioritized cooperatives, nonprofits, and municipalities in the selection process to choose the bidder that could provide service to the most addresses for the least cost. The co-op will also be required to provide a low-cost option for high-speed access. The build-out will reach co-op members in 73 towns across Grafton, Belknap, Carroll, Coops, Sullivan, and Merrimack counties, according to the electric provider. The co-op does not yet have an estimate about when the service will be available, but it's up against a federal 2026 deadline to complete the project. So that's an ARPA, American Recovery Act, something like that. Wow, just totally lost that one. Many, many acronyms stored in my head. Let's see, the state received an additional $66 million in September and has put out another request for proposal to bidders to spend $40 million of that money on building infrastructure. That proposal is due by November 28th. So again, you see here, lots going on in broadband, and even with money not yet available through BEAD and some of these other federal dollars that haven't yet been released, a lot's going on. So I'm of the opinion that we're going to have enough money when BEAD comes out. We're going to have enough money to build broadband throughout the United States. And actually later this week, I'm not sure if it'll be Wednesday, Thursday, but later this week, I saw something that the ACA put out. That's basically a study they did with Cartesian that did come to the conclusion also that there's going to be enough money based on everything that's taking place right now, and the money that's available, and what is going to still be unserved and underserved at the time that money is available. So the new money is available. So that'll be interesting to look at again later in the week. So thanks for joining me. If this was interesting, if you would give me a like on the video. If you're not subscribed, click the subscribe button, ring the little bell, and you'll be notified when I'm live. Thanks a lot for joining me for Broadband Deployment News, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.